Scrupulosity is a subtype of obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, involving religious or moral obsession. It is also defined as pathological guilt and anxiety about moral issues. We typically see the mental disorder of scrupulosity with people who tend to be religious. And today on this Mystery Monday, we're going to be talking about a stigmatic whose life happened closer to our times. And therefore, I feel like with this particular person, we can probably be a little bit more objective. But before we go any further, you know what to do. Please hit that like button and give us a subscribe. As always, such a very big thank you to all of our patrons and our producers here on Esoteric Atlanta. Without you guys, this channel would not be possible. If you would like to join our Patreon or our producer community, there is a link down in the description box below. Welcome to Esoteric Atlanta. My name is Bryce, and today on Mystery Monday, we're going to be looking at the stigmatic Padre Pio. All right, you guys, Padre Pio was probably one of the most requested stigmatics that I got after our first episode on stigmatics, which was St. Francis of Assisi. And Padre Pio kind of was maybe a protege of St. Francis, even though they lived hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years apart. Allegedly, according to what I've researched about Padre Pio, he was greatly inspired by St. Francis. Now, as I said in our first episode on St. Francis, while looking at the stigmata and the stigmatics, I do believe that every single person we cover when we look at this great mystery is going to be different. I think that every single person is going to have different reasons for having the stigmata. And I don't always, in my opinion, believe that these stigmatas are necessarily a good thing. With that being said, as I say a lot, or have been lately saying a lot, is us human beings, we're a complicated bunch. And there's a lot of complexities that have to do with the human mind. There's a lot of complexities in spirituality. We even know with the law of one that in order to be harvested positive into the light, you only have to be 51% service to self, because there's a lot of chaos down here in third density. And I do think that in a lot of cases, people with really good intentions sometimes get involved in really bad organizations. And sometimes because of that involvement and because of whatever indoctrination they've gone through, they end up following a path that might not be the best path, although their intention stays pure. And I definitely think this is the case for Padre Pio. Before we get into Padre Pio, I also want to say that I did learn a little something interesting about demonic attacks. Now, as you guys know, if you've been around for a while, I've experienced a lot of physical attacks myself from the supernatural. Well, allegedly, there are some cases where demonic attacks and demonic entities can make one bleed from specific places in their body, kind of like the stigmata. And we know that a lot of times dark entities like to pretend they're light and like to pretend they're doing good things when actually they're not. We also know from looking at the missing books of the Bible that Yeshua, the real guy, was never crucified. And that the whole story that the church has concocted is coming from more of a satanic ritual than that of Christ. But nonetheless, let's get into Padre Pio. Padre Pio was born Francisco Forgione on the 25th of May, 1887. He was born to very humble beginnings. His family were farmers, and his boyhood home had only one room and one window. Padre Pio was born in Campania, which is the southern part of Italy. And when I say his family was poor, man, they were super, super, super poor. I mean, we're talking again, one room, one window. He had multiple brothers and sisters. His parents were peasant farmers, and so part of Padre Pio's childhood was not stereotypical of what a modern day childhood would look like. I mean, it was 1887, so it definitely was not the same as those of us born in the 1900s. There were obviously no laws when it came to child labor, but with peasant farmers, a lot of the children had to go and work the farm. So at this point in history, a lot of the peasants did not have an education. And funnily enough, that would go on to be one of the things that Padre Pio did that was really, really good. He did decide when he got into the priesthood that he was going to make sure that the children of peasant farmers at least learned how to read and write. I've said this before, if you can learn how to read and write, you can do anything. Like, that is the foundation of all education. On top of Padre Pio's family being very poor, being peasantry class, they were also extremely religious. Now, that is not odd for Italy at this time, especially in the late 19th century, but Padre Pio's parents would literally go to Mass every single day. They were members of the Santa Anna Chapel, and this is where Padre Pio was baptized. This is also where he would go on to be an altar boy into his childhood. Now, another interesting fact about Padre Pio is that when he was a child, and throughout most of his adulthood, but especially as a child, he was incredibly sick. And I will say, again, this is where the complexity comes in, because there's a lot of similarities between Padre Pio's sicknesses that he had as a child and my own. I mean, I was born a white Anglican chick in the United States who came from a wealthy family where we were educated, and he was born a poor Italian boy. So there was Catholic boy so there's not a lot of commonality between Padre Pio's life and my own, but I really could definitely relate to him with his digestion problems, because that was kind of the basis of Padre Pio's health issues, was his digestion, which is the basis of my issues as well. I mean, when I was 6 months old, I was in the hospital because I could not digest anything. No juice, no milk, nothing. And then again, in the second grade at 8 years old, I was back in the hospital because every night I would get up and start throwing up in the middle of the night. I couldn't keep anything down. I still struggle to this day with my digestion. Now, funnily enough, my problems also come from being O negative. And with the story of Padre Pio, I have to wonder if maybe he was also recessive negative, because Padre Pio would also go on to have a lot of supernatural phenomenon happen to him from the time he was a child. Same, bro. You know, he would get beaten up by entities. Same. And he would have almost these like supernatural abilities that were very unworldly. And so, just speculation here, given that he had digestion problems, extreme digestion problems, and was also having extreme supernatural phenomenon happening around him, does make me wonder if he is Rh negative. This seems to be very, very common, but nonetheless, and I understand this, I totally understand this. Like, when you have a digestion issue or any type of ongoing health problem, it absolutely changes your perspective of the world. You have to almost, in a sense, grow up a lot sooner. And you mix that on top of having supernatural phenomenon happen around you, and you definitely become the weirdo kid. You definitely become the kid who's questioning life before you're probably age appropriate enough to be questioning life. And so I super get it. I get it. I get why he wanted to join the priesthood from a very young age. Of course, for him, the Catholic friary, these priesthoods, are what he understood about spiritual pursuits. You know, if he had been born in today's time in a Catholic family in Italy, there might be more opportunity for him to explore the questions that he has about life and about himself and God and what's going on in the world through different means. But nonetheless, the means given to him were the Catholic friary. So, from a very young age, he decided that he definitely wanted to become a monk. He also had a sister that would go on to become a nun. So obviously this was something that was very accepted by his family. By 1897, at only 10 years old, Padre Pio was insistent that he wanted to get involved with the Capuchin order. And at this point, he had had a couple of years of like some sketchy public school, like definitely was not educated. And so his family took him to the order, his parents did, to see what they needed to do to get him enrolled as a monk. And I didn't know this. This was interesting. Again, I was not raised Catholic. So some of the corporation, some of the how the business of the Catholic Church works are new to me. But apparently, maybe it's different now. If you grew up Catholic, let me know down in the comment section below. But at this point, at the turn of the century, 1897, in order to be admitted into a monkhood, an order, a friary, you had to pass a certain like test. You had to have a certain level of education. Like you would be tested in to see if you were smart enough to be a monk. I don't know. But at this point, Pio, obviously at 10 years old with very little education, was not eligible to be tested into this particular monastery. And so, being good parents, Padre Pio's father decided that he was going to go to the United States to look for work so that he could financially afford to pay for a private tutor so that Pio could be pass the test in order to be admitted into the monastery. Now, again, you'll have to think about 1897. This is at the end of the Industrial Revolution, and I don't know what Padre Pio's father, what kind of work Padre Pio's father got in the United States. But if I had to guess, if I were a betting gal, he probably went somewhere like New York to work in factories or perhaps to work on the railroad. Because again, this was the very tail end of the Industrial Revolution, where we have tons of factories now. There's tons of opportunities for work, although the opportunities aren't that great, like you're living in filth. But coming from a very small town in Italy, I definitely, like, I get it. I totally get it, like why he went to America, because there's more opportunity and he can make the money he needs to send back to Italy so that his son can follow his dreams. And you can't fault a parent for wanting to do whatever they can to allow their child to follow their dreams. On the 27th of September, 1899, just a couple years later, Padre Pio receives his confirmation. Now, confirmation, for those who do not grow up or did not grow up in any Christian home, basically it's like a new contract. Like you get baptized and then your confirmation basically seals your covenant that was made at your baptism. So your baptism, for most denominations, Presbyterian included, me, like Methodist, most of them do baptisms when you're very, very young. I think the only people who do older baptisms, like when you're old enough, is like the Baptist and maybe like the Jehovah's Witnesses, and maybe the Mormons. But most people get baptized. If you grew up in a different religion, like if you grew up a Hindu or Muslim, most Christendom, you get baptized as a baby. And this custom started back a long time ago when babies didn't live that long. So they wanted to baptize the child as quickly as possible to make sure if anything happened to the child, they wouldn't get stuck in limbo or in purgatory. They'd be able to go straight into heaven. And basically, depending on the flavor of Christianity that you grew up in, that depends on how you're baptized. Most baptisms are done with water. Presbyterian Church, it's done with water. But the Catholic Church, it's done with like water and oils. So when you're a baby, you don't really know what's going on. You're just getting baptized. But then when you're a young child or going into your like preteen years, different ages for different congregations, you go through confirmation. Now, in the Catholic Church, they call it the sacrament of confirmation, and it's a bigger deal than like us in the Presbyterian Church. In the Presbyterian Church, we just basically take like the cracker and the juice and that's it. And you're like, okay, cool. You now like reconfirm. I still think you're too young to make those decisions, but nonetheless, it's a bigger deal. I guess what I mean to say, it's a bigger deal in the Catholic churches than it is in the Protestant churches. So the 27th of September, 1899, he is basically confirmed to the Catholic faith. He's renegotiating and reagreeing to his original baptism that he had when he was a baby. So during this time from 1899 to 1903, while Pio's father is in the United States working to pay for the private tutor, more money is sent in. He's able to get his education that he needs in order to take his tests that are required of him to pass to get into the monastery. And he does. He takes his test and he passes. On the 6th of January, 1903, at 15 years old, he enters the order as a novice. On the 22nd of January, 1903, he takes the name Friar Pio in honor of Pope Pius I, whose remains lay buried at his hometown parish. At this point, he took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Now, the Capuchin order is an order of the Franciscan orders, like again, St. Francis, who we spoke about in our last episode on Stigmata. And basically, in the 1500s, they kind of reinvented themselves. The Franciscan order reinvented itself to the Capuchin order because they wanted to reinstate the wearing of the tunic that St. Francis was famous for wearing, this brown leather sack that you famously see St. Francis wearing in a lot of his paintings. It's kind of a sign of poverty, of choosing that you're going to pick a life that's not materialistic, a more monastic life. And so at this point, again, he's taking a vow of chastity, of obedience, and of poverty, and he's now wearing the tunic of the Capuchin order. At 17 years old, Padre Pio's health started to decline again. He was struggling with insomnia, and because of the insomnia, he was going into extreme bouts of fatigue. His digestion issues got even worse to the point where he could only digest like bread and milk. I get that. Listen, y'all, if you got friends or if you have family members who have terrible digestion problems and they bring their own food to an event or they only like eat the same things over and over again, do not pester them. If you've never had digestion issues, then you have no clue what that's like, and you cannot digestion issues will literally shut you down. And if your digestion issues are bad enough, it's going to affect the blood in your body. It's going to affect your other organs. So totally get that, Padre Pio. Like if cheese and milk or milk and bread or whatever was all you could eat at this time, at least there's something you can eat. And I don't think anybody should be concerned about that because at least you are getting food in. He also would complain about getting heavy migraines. Now, in my opinion, this could be spiritual warfare. It could be something altogether different health-wise, but I think the migraines, just from my own opinion of my own issues with digestion, I think the migraines probably have a lot to do with the digestive system because again, it's about the blood flow. So if your body, if your colon is messed up and your colon is the trash can of your body, like if your blood is supposed to take all the toxins to your colon to be expelled and your colon can't do that because there's something wrong, then all those toxins that the blood carries in are just going to be pushed right back out into your body. And so that can cause migraine. So that's my opinion. And that could be wrong, but I just wanted to bring that up. I didn't see in any of the research that I did where people were like correlating the two, that they could be related. And maybe that was because this was like the early 20th century, so they didn't know. But I was like, dude, when I was doing this research, I was like, of course he's got migraines. He has digestion issues. Duh. But nonetheless, we also see at age 17, this is where Padre Pio starts to show not only that he's being attacked spiritually, but that he has got some spiritual, I'll say, powers. People would talk about how he would get into a trance when he was praying. And this is a personality trait of Padre Pio's that kind of lives with him his whole life. And many people claim that they would see him levitate. And I'm not doubting that. I mean, there's a lot about Padre Pio's life that mirrors the life of a yogi. And I think he did have the fortitude of that meditative power to be able to kind of control his own consciousness. We're going to talk more about this with his ability to bilocate later on in the episode. But I thought it was just interesting that we're seeing such a chaotic life as far as his health and these spiritual attacks, but we're also seeing at the flip side this ability for him to almost control his own consciousness, which again is a form of levitation. After 7 years in the priesthood, Padre Pio decides to head up to St. Francis of Assisi's chapel and to pay homage to St. Francis's remains. I can imagine, again, that Padre Pio felt very connected to St. Francis and he idolized St. Francis. And I do know that people say they often have very spiritual experiences being around the remains of St. Francis. So perhaps this pilgrimage that Padre Pio went on after 7 years, after dealing with everything he was dealing with, perhaps he was going there to look for some solace and some relief within his own life experience. By 1905, Padre Pio's health had gotten so bad that the church decided that they were going to send Padre Pio to live in the mountains. They basically were like, let's get him some fresh air. Maybe that will make him feel better, but it didn't work. So after a couple of years, they sent Padre Pio back, and they actually allowed him to go back and live with his mother for a bit, just because they felt like he needed the support and the help of family. At this point, Padre Pio would go into trances where he would write like mystic letters. Maybe he was channeling. I don't know. But it was very odd. Like what was happening with him was very odd. His ability to kind of, as we're seeing as a young boy, to kind of have this supernatural paralysis. Throughout his sicknesses, throughout everything, Padre Pio did remain extremely devout and extremely religious. On August the 10th of 1910, Padre Pio was officially ordained as a priest. On August 14th of 1910, Padre Pio held his first Mass at Our Lady of the Angels. By the 4th of September 1916, Padre Pio was ordered to return back to the monastic life. He was placed at Our Lady of Grace Friary in the Gargano Mountains in San Giovanni Rotonda. This would be the place where Padre Pio would spend the rest of his life, and what a beautiful place to live. I don't think anybody's complaining. And at this time, there were only about 7 friars at this monastery, so it was a very quiet life, which for all intents and purposes, for everything I researched about Padre Pio, throughout his whole life, he was never seeking fame. He actually wanted the quiet life. In fact, when he got his stigmata, he was kind of embarrassed by it. He hated taking photographs. He just really wanted to serve God. While at this monastery with only 7 other people around, he really got deeper into his spiritual life. He became a very, very heavy meditator. And in fact, he would do the rosary so much that it almost became what we would call in the yoga world japa meditation, where he's moving the beads and gets into this trance of meditative reflection. In fact, very different from a lot of priests at his time is that Padre Pio encouraged his people, I don't know what you would call in the Catholic Church, your parishioners, the people who come to you, he would encourage them to really embark in self-reflection, which is a huge part of any type of spiritual practice, the self-study, the self-reflection. He also believed that confessions were one of the most important sacraments that someone could take. And I totally get this. Like, this dude was literally telling you that therapy is important, because that's kind of what a confession is. He believed it was, again, the most important sacrament, and that when you came in to confess, you got to talk things out, because we know that sin just means to miss the mark. And so when you've messed up in your life and you go talk to somebody about it and you have self-reflection, you can course correct. And so a lot of his parishioners did feel a huge shift in their lives coming to Padre Pio. And again, I don't know if it's, I mean, of course, you can have a good 2 priests or 2 yoga teachers teaching the same thing, and one could help people and one couldn't, depending on their delivery and the authenticity and the integrity in which they address their parishioner or their student. You know, so one could be good and one could be bad, but, you know, literally, this is what Padre Pio is doing, right? This is not something that's just exclusive to Catholicism. Like, he's tapping into very old practices that have been practiced in the East for a hell of a lot longer than Christianity's even been around. And interestingly enough, a lot of what Padre Pio tapped into in order to help people connect back with God through themselves is actually what Yahshua taught, the real Yahshua, not Jesus, not the fake one, but the real Yahshua. So in a lot of ways, Padre Pio, even though he's in this corrupt organization, he has found through his own experience the crux of the real spiritual teaching, which again is self-reflection. He was huge on self-reflection. He had this really famous quote, and I freaking love this quote. I'm going to have to remember it and use it a lot. He would say, pray, hope, and don't worry. Pray, meditate, have faith, and then let it go. God's got it. And again, that is part of yoga as well, is total devotion to God. In Sichananda's commentary on the Yoga Sutra, he talks about anxiety. That anytime we experience anxiety or fear, that's when we know we're out of alignment with God. Because if we have total faith in God, we will not experience anxiety or fear. Now, that doesn't mean that we live haphazardly, like our friend Tamara says. trust God, but tie up your donkey. Like, do everything you need to do, pray, be a good person, self-reflect, but don't worry, trust God. So again, we're seeing that Padre Pio is intuitively and through his own experience picking up these practices that might have been revolutionary for the Catholic Church at this time, but are actually found in really old scriptures from the East. This is literally what the real Yahshua ben Yosef taught. On the 28th of July, 1914, the world went into chaos as World War I began. Once World War I started, 5 friars were drafted into military service from Padre Pio's monastery. I didn't know they drafted monks and friars. I know for us, for the Vietnam War, if you were going into religious services, you didn't get drafted. So I thought that was like super interesting that they were going to start drafting these monks. That's what they did. Wow. On the 15th of November, 1915, Pio himself was drafted into the military to serve in World War I, although he was discharged pretty quickly due to his health conditions. By September of 1918, Padre Pio's spiritual phenomenons, his mystical side, was in full swing. Something else Padre Pio would do that I was like, yeah, dude, is he would get up at 2:30 in the morning to start his meditation and to start his day. Y'all have heard me talk about this many times. This is called Brahma Muhurta. I get up at like 3:30 every morning. I've done it for years now. Traditional yoga is taught at like 4 o'clock in the morning. It's Brahma Muhurta. Brahma Muhurta is the time of day, early morning hours, that's called the time of God. And so what Padre Pio was doing yet again, is part of Eastern philosophy. It's getting up. People always are like, oh, you're so crazy. You get up so early. No, boo. Like, literally study Ayurveda, study Eastern philosophy. You should be getting up well before 6 a.m. If you're going to bed super late and getting up late, you're off with the rhythm of God. And part of taking on a spiritual life, whether it's through Catholicism or through yoga, is getting into that rhythm of Brahma Muhurta. This is like spirituality 101. This is the big, like, it cracks me up. Like, I'll be in yoga studios and people, these teachers will have never heard of Brahma Muhurta. I'm like, that's literally the foundation. It's literally, that's like not like trying to learn to read without knowing your ABCs. Brahma Muhurta, time of God, that's what that means. And Padre Pio was doing this. He was doing Brahma Muhurta, just like I do Brahma Muhurta, just like millions of people across the world. So and again, I'll say, in defense of Padre Pio and myself, those of us who practice Brahma Muhurta, don't confuse. Do not confuse your laziness with somebody else's discipline. People who get up for Brahma Muhurta, don't be like, oh my God, I can never do that. Like, my body is just not made to do that. That's bullshit. And that's so disrespectful to the person you're saying that to. Because anybody who gets up at 2:30 in the morning or 3 in the morning for Brahma Muhurta, it's a discipline. It's a discipline. You want to be sloth. That's why sloth is one of the 7 deadly sins, right? It kind of goes back to the whole medbed thing too. All these people are like laying around, eating crap food, not exercising, waiting for some bippity boppity boo medbed. Sloth is one of the 7 deadly sins. Wake up. Wake up. Do you not realize? Do you not know that God gave you a body and an immune system that can heal itself already? You just have to put effort. The Yoga Sutras talk about effort. There has to be effort. That's tapas, that's focus put into that in order to ignite it. And if you're waiting around for a damn medbed, you're not following God's path. You're following Lucifer's. If you're going to sit there and say, I can't get up early in the morning because I'm too tired and I'm just not built that way, that's you being sloth. That's sloth. Sorry, I didn't mean to go up on a tangent on that, but when I learned that about Padre Pio, I was like, of course he was getting up at 2:30. That's Brahma Muhurta. And if he was getting up at 2:30, like, part of me thinks maybe he just like channeled this information and maybe he just like intuitively figured it out through his own experiences. Maybe he had access to some of the missing books of the Bible and some of the manuscripts that we don't have access to. Maybe that's where he learned it from, was the East. You know, I don't know. Or maybe back in the early 1900s, people just knew this. Maybe a lot of people just, it's Brahma Morta. Maybe a lot of people knew that back then. I don't know, but it was interesting. He became a bit of a spiritual director. And I actually wrote in my notes, I wrote guru. He became a guru. Like literally, he became a guru. What is a guru? Guru means dark to light. It's a master teacher who has a lot of experience. So he had these 5 rules to live by for his devotees, his students, his parishioners, whatever you want to call them. And that is weekly confession, so therapy, weekly therapy, daily communion, which, you know, I'm not a Catholic, so we don't do daily communion, but I could see that as maybe your daily sadhana or your daily discipline, like your Brahma Muhurta time, your practice. Spiritual reading. The Yoga Sutras talk about this as well, that you need to devote some time to reading the old text, reading the Bhagavad Gita, the Vedas. Meditation. That's mental focus. Yeah, absolutely. An examination of consciousness or self-study. The dude is basically teaching you yoga. That's basically what Padre Pio was teaching you, is yoga. Same thing, same. By 1925, Padre Pio decided to convert an old convent into a clinic, a health clinic for those who were in extreme need. And what's interesting is when I was reading this, it seemed very similar to Mother Teresa. She wasn't a stigmatic. In my opinion, she was a very nasty person. Now, again, this is complicated, right? Like, I actually do believe that Padre Pio was a good person. I think that everything he experienced spiritually was very real. I think he tapped into a sense of a siddhi, as it's called in yoga, a higher state of consciousness. And I think he had a very giving heart. I don't think he saw himself as being any better than anybody else, which is also a sign of the light. And there is a lot of speculation around this hospital that he opened. My opinion, this is just my opinion, I believe that he opened this hospital with good intention. And I believe this is probably true for all of Padre Pio's life. I think that Padre Pio was a good person who was surrounded by evil. A lot of what the darkness will do, like if Padre Pio, for example, if he was like a wanderer, let's say, like he came from the 5th density or something, the darkness will try to like encapsulate that. And so I kind of can see that with Padre Pio, even though he helped so many people, he constantly had somebody like following him or coming in and maybe trying to corrupt what he was doing, which happens to wanderers all the time. By 1940, the Catholic Church decided that they needed to form a committee to raise money to make this hospital bigger. Great, right? Wow. Absolutely. Let's do it. Let's do it to it. Let's do it. Amazing. However, the Catholic Church is involved now. It's not just Padre Pio going, hey, we've got this convent. No one's using it. I'm just going to like make it a clinic for people who are like super in need and just need help. I'm just going to do that. Okay, with this little convent. Cool. We got the land. No one's using it. All right, cool. And then like your boss comes in and said, you're doing such good work here. We're going to form a committee and we're going to make this bigger. Yay, exciting. However, this is when things get interesting, because he starts to get donations from the money from some pretty unscrupulous people. One is a man by the name of Manuel Bernardo. Now, he was a follower of Pio, but allegedly he got his money through abuse of the black market in the war. Another donor of 250 million Italian lire was from the United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration. Now, people started to claim that a lot of the funds that were given towards this hospital were absolutely being used inappropriately. And we know of anything that the UN is involved with, LOL, it's not good, right? Like when I read that, I was like, oh shit. I was like, sorry, Pio. I don't know if they were doing good things in that hospital of yours. In 1956, Padre Pio puts his hands up in the air and gives total control of his hospital to the Holy See, meaning the Pope. On the 22nd of September, 1968, Padre Pio was a very weak, older man, and he gave a mass. This mass was to celebrate the 50th anniversary of his Stigmata. People came from everywhere, camera crews came from everywhere to celebrate this mass. After the mass was complete, Padre Pio went back to his apartment, his cell as they're called, which I think is just, I don't like it that it's called a cell, so we'll just call it a little apartment. And in the early mornings of the 23rd of September, the next day, Padre Pio made his last confession, reviewed his vows, and proceeded to try to say his Hail Marys. He was a little bit too weak to say Hail Mary, so he was just heard mumbling Jesus Mary, over and over again. And ironically enough, around 2:30, around the start of Brahma Muerta, Padre Pio passed away. After his death, a doctor investigated his body and saw that the stigmatas themselves had absolutely healed. There was no sign of any scarring. On the 26th of September, they had a funeral, a state funeral, where 100,000 people showed up. Now, on the 3rd of March, 2008, Padre Pio's body was examined. It had been buried in the monastery where he had spent most of his life. They ended up removing his heart, and y'all, this is so creepy. I can't wait to discuss this episode with Shanti over on Aquarius Rising Africa on Wednesday, because what is this? Like, why are they kissing the heart? There's a huge story between the Sacred Heart of Jesus, that picture about it has to do with cannibalism. And so what are they doing with Padre Pio's heart? That's disgusting. And the fact that they made a mask to like put over his face, his skull, so people could like look at his body. Do you guys not see how fucked up this is? Like, I know for Catholics, this might be a little bit hard, because this is done more, like, we don't do this in the Protestant churches. But do you understand, like, any type of cannibalism and any type of idolizing a dead body is a form of necromancy? Anyway, just my opinion, but it's weird. It's weird. We'll go deeper into the complexities of this at the end of the episode. Now, I personally also believe that what we're seeing here with Padre Pio, he might be a wanderer. He might have intuitively figured out all this like meditation stuff and self-development through, you know, self-reflection, confession, all that kind of stuff. But I think what we're also seeing with Padre Pio is scrupulosity. That's another thing that hit me right away when I was researching Padre Pio. And I think a lot of people, as I said in the beginning, I feel like scrupulosity is a mental disorder that is not spoken about enough. And I think it's not spoken about enough because I think the powers that be, like when people have scrupulosity, it's a hard word to say. This basically means you're just so obsessed with your religion that you develop like an OCD over it, and it causes, I mean, I've struggled with OCD myself. I still struggle with OCD, not scrupulosity, but through other things, and it can be very detrimental to someone's health. And I feel like Padre Pio, if he had been born in a situation where there was no religion, but it was just spirituality he was practicing, he probably could have done even more. But the fact that he felt so confined to the Catholic Church and the Catholic religion, taking obedience to the Pope and this pecking order, definitely was not good. Even though I think he was good, this was not good. I would love to hear y'all's thoughts on that too. If you guys want us to talk more, I think scrupulosity is something we probably should talk more about, especially with Shanti over on Aquarius Rising Africa. So let me know in the comment section below if that's something you guys want to examine more, like what is scrupulosity, how does it affect, how does this mental disorder affect people, all that kind of stuff. Now, I do want to go into and look at more stuff having to do with Padre Pio's supernatural abilities. But before we get into that, we are going to pause for a brief message from one of our new sponsors here on Esoteric Atlanta, and that's MiraMate. MiraMate is a sister company to Spooky 2. I'm so excited. We're going to play a little informational video for you. Everything will be down in the description box below. MiraMate and Spooky 2, both of these websites are down in the description box below. If you want 5% off of any of their products from Spooky 2 or MiraMate, you just enter my name, Bryce Watson, for 5% off at checkout. That's your discount code, Bryce Watson, at checkout for both MiraMate and Spooky 2. So hold tight. Let's hear from MiraMate, and we'll get right back into our show. Before we continue with the story today, I want to give a brief shout out to one of our sponsors, MiraMate. MiraMate is a sister company to Spooky 2. And let's go ahead and just take a gander at the website for a moment, because I am so excited about this product. Actually, there's so many products on this website, you guys. It is a PEMF mat. So this is along the lines of Spooky 2, where it's working with frequency, Tesla technology to heal you, basically. Of course, a lot of people are familiar with the big mats that you can lay on, that it works on your whole body, but there's also like a mini magic mat as well that you can sit on. There's the UVA therapy. We also have these things, these MiraMate Mini Magic. You can take, you guys, you can take this on a run with you. You just clip it to your outfit or hiking, and it helps keep your body from basically falling apart while you are doing what you love to do. Analog PEMF therapy involves the use of devices that emit low-frequency electromagnetic waves. These waves are designed to penetrate the body and stimulate cellular functions. Unlike digital PEMF devices, which generate pulse signals using digital electronics, analog PEMF devices produce continuous and smooth waveforms closely resembling the natural magnetic fields found in the environment. This can help with sleep problems, pain and inflammation, mood issues, fatigue and lethargy, and difficulty concentrating. You guys, there are so many products. I swear to God, I just did a video. I just filmed a video with Brad. You guys know Brad. He's with Spooky 2 and with MiraMate. And I could not get over the amount of products that this company actually has. They have videos, obviously, of customer reviews. So if you want to go on the website, which we listed down below, you can look at all of the customer reviews. I mean, their shop, guys, they have PEMF machines, the light devices, cold laser devices. They have products for fertility. They have a specific product under their cold laser devices that are specifically for your period. For women, they have stuff for men's prostates. This is I cannot wait to use this product myself. I am so excited. Now, as always with this product, as well as Spooky 2, if you place my name, Bryce Watson, BRICEWATSON, at discount code, you will get 5% off of your purchase, just like with Spooky 2. So as always, everything will be down in the description box below. As MiraMate, just like Spooky 2, has incredible customer services. They are really an incredible company. They've treated me very well. I know from some of you who've reached out to me, you tell me that they actually were so good to you as well, and they helped explain things to you and helped work you through using the product. So if this is something you're interested in, I would absolutely encourage you to try this product, get in touch with Brad, and go ahead and explore the website. There's so many options, different price points of things you can do, and it's an excellent way to get your health back. All right, you guys, let's get back to the scandalous and juicy deep dive. Isn't that awesome, you guys? MiraMate I'm so excited about this product. I can't wait to get it for myself. This is a product, these mats, I'm familiar with. I've used them in a lot of yoga studios. And if you are interested in taking your own health back and taking your sovereignty back with your health, then I would absolutely suggest checking out their websites. All right, you guys, I wanted to, again, talk deeper about the spiritual and supernatural phenomenon associated with Padre Pio. I don't have an answer. Again, a lot of, as I said, with St. Francis of Assisi, I did look at the Cassiopeians at their channeling board to see if they had anything to say about stigmatas. As I shared with St. Francis, yes, it was brought up one time in a channeling session, and all that they said was that the stigmata was real. They didn't say if it was good or if it was bad. However, as I said at the beginning of this episode, I've run across research where a lot of demonic activity and demonic attacks looks and results in people bleeding, like from their eyes and from other places in their body. And kind of my personal, I mean, this might be confirmation biased on my part, but part of my personal feelings when I think about the stigmata is that demons are using someone's scrupulosity to create suffering and pain and have them confuse it for something good, which is definitely what I think happened to Padre Pio. You know, with the St. Francis of Assisi, it only happened to him one time and he died right after it. It killed him. But this dude dealt with it for 50 years. And in some cases, people claimed that Padre Pio actually prayed for this stigmatism. And again, that goes back to scrupulosity, that he felt like he wanted to feel the suffering of Christ. Why? If you believe Christ died for you, which is part of the Luciferian agenda, I don't know if Padre Pio knew that or not, then why do you need to feel the suffering too? Again, scrupulosity. It's a mental disorder. And I think a lot of mental disorders are started by either witchcraft or demonic activities. So I went through I listened to a lot of podcasts. I listened to a lot of reports, especially of older stuff of people. Again, Padre Pio died in 1968. So he's very close to us. Like, he's modern times. And there's still a lot of people alive who had miracles performed by him, all that kind of stuff. And I'll say this too, like, just because somebody can perform miracles does not mean they're good. Like, sometimes the darkness will use that as a way to, like, get people to be more vulnerable towards them. But again, I do think Padre Pio was good. I think he was good. I don't know if his supernatural abilities were because he was good, and I think he gained access to them because of his spiritual work. But part of me wonders what, because of his group, he's in this meditative state, he's practicing self-reflection, confession, all this kind of stuff. He's very involved he's a monk, basically. He's a priest, a friar, but he's also got scrupulosity. So he's on this path where I said earlier, he's picked up through his own experience the path of spirit, the true path of spirituality, which is found in Yoga Sutras, is what Yahshua taught. But he's also mixing that with scrupulosity, which I think is definitely more of a demonic hold. So I don't know. But again, you can be service to others, only be 51% service to others, and 49% of you could be a complete mess. So it doesn't even matter if there was complexity with Padre Pio, and maybe he was dealing with a lot of demonic stuff, and in a bad trying to do good and unknowingly do good in a bad organization. But it doesn't even matter anyway, because he was so good that it kind of overrid some of that stuff. I don't know. I mean, this is big question mark. I don't even know if any of us will ever truly know. But I do believe, my opinion on the stigmata of his, I do believe it was a demonic attack through scrupulosity. Now, I typically do not use Wikipedia for my research, but after listening to all these interviews with people and all these claims, I was looking through to find a place where everything was kind of put together, of everything that people said he could do, because the stigmata is only a small part of his spiritual powers. And Wikipedia, surprisingly enough, was the only place that really had them all together, listed together. And when I read through it, I was like, hey, this matches, oddly enough, what Wikipedia has up on its website for this matches all the other research. So we're just going to go straight to Padre Pio's Padre Pio's page on Wikipedia. All right, here we go. So, supernatural phenomenon. Pio was said to have had mystical gifts such as reading souls, the ability to bilocate, and the ability to work favors and healings before they were requested of him. I have issues with that, like reading souls. You shouldn't be reading souls unless you've been given permission to do that. And you should not be giving favors unless they're asked of you. Like, don't do it beforehand, because that could change someone's free will. So that's an issue I do have. He reported supernatural experiences also included celestial visions, communication with angels, and physical fights with Satan's demons. The reports of supernatural phenomena surrounding Pio attracted fame and amazement, even if the Vatican seemed skeptical. Some of these phenomena were reported by Pio himself in letters written to his spiritual directors, while others have been reported by his followers, the Stigmata. Now, when it talks about the Vatican here and his dealings with the Vatican, this is what makes me think that Padre Pio was probably a wanderer who got mixed up in a crazy, like, he maybe got a little confused about the path to God, and got scrupulosity took over, but he was still like a wanderer. Because why else would the Vatican exhume his body and pull his heart out? I mean, obviously there was something about his DNA, something about himself, that the fractal of his soul running through his DNA, that they want. Because the dark side can't create anything, only the light can. They can only steal from the light and invert. So would love to hear your opinion down in the comment section on that. Please be careful with your words, though, because, we're on YouTube. All right, the Stigmata. Pio wrote in his letter that early in his priesthood, he experienced bodily marks, pains, and bleeding in locations indicative words there. indicative, it's been a long day, indicative of the not yet visible stigmata, which that's another thing with the stigmata. Even though Padre Pio has pictures like he literally had blood coming out of him, some people, some stigmatics don't have blood. They just feel the pain, which probably is worse. If you're gonna freaking feel the pain, you might as well have the blood to show for it, right? Like a souvenir. Anyway, in a letter to his spiritual companion, Father Agostino Gemelli, I'm not Italian, so I hope I said that right, dated 21st of March, 1912, Pio wrote of his devotion to the mystical body of Christ and the intuition that he would bear the stigmata. Luzzatto claimed that in his letter, Pio used unrecognized passage from a book by the stigmatized mystic Gemma Galgani. Y'all, let's cover her next. What do y'all think? I wanted to do a girl next. I wanted to do a girl next. A stigmatized mystic. Y'all want me to do Miss Gemma next? Let me know down in the comment section. A stigmatized mystic, that sounds very, that's enticing, right? That sounds very scandalous. In a 1915 letter, Agostino asked Pio specific questions, including when did he first experience visions, whether he was a stigmatic, and whether he felt the pains of the Passion of Christ, namely the crowning of the thorns and the scourging. Pio replied that he had had visions since his novice period, so like when he first came into the friary from 1903 to 1904, and that he was a stigmatic, adding that he had been so terrified by the phenomenon that he begged God to withdraw his stigmata. He also wrote that he did not wish for the pain to be removed, only the visible wounds, since he considered them to be an indescribable and almost unbearable humiliation. So I did read that he did not want the blood to be shown. He was embarrassed by it, but he wanted to feel the suffering of Christ on the cross. Which again, scrupulosity, that makes me 100% think of the mental disorder scrupulosity. On the 20th of September 1918, while hearing confessions, Pio has said to have had a reappearance of the physical occurrence of stigmata. His stigmatism reportedly continued for 50 years until the end of his life. The blood flow from the stigmata purportedly smelled of perfume or flowers. Pio conveyed to Agostino that the pain remained and was more acute on specific days under certain circumstances. Though he said he would have preferred to suffer in secret, by early 1919, news that he was a stigmatic had begun to spread. Pio often wore red mittens or black coverings on his hands and feet, saying that he was embarrassed by the marks. Once made public, the wounds were studied by a number of physicians, some hired by the Vatican as part of an independent investigation. Some claimed that the wounds were unexplainable, and never seemed to have become infected. Despite seeming to heal, they would reappear periodically. So x-rays of Pio's hands were taken in 1954 and found no abnormality in the bone structure. Some critics accused Pio of faking the stigmata, for example, by using carbonic acid to make the wounds. Maria De Vito, the cousin of a local pharmacist, testified that young Pio bought carbolic acid and the great quantity of 4 grams. So basically, there were some people that were saying he was faking it. And this person right here basically acted as a witness that he was faking it. But I go back to the doctor that examined his body after death and said that there was no scars. So if he was using acid, there would actually be scars. So I don't know. All right. Transverberation. In August of 1918, a few weeks before reportedly receiving the stigmata, Pio described a mystical experience during which he felt being pierced and burnt spiritually and physically. According to Pio, this mystical experience began on the 5th of August and ended on the 7th of August. Padre Benedetto, his spiritual director, interpreted this phenomenon as transverberation. Pio later claimed that this experience left a physical wound on his left side. Most witnesses who examined Pio's wounds reported that he had a wound on his left side, around 3 inches long, in the shape of a cross. Interesting. Bilocation. Bilocation is big in the yoga world, by the way. Bilocation. Pio was believed by his followers to have the gift of bilocation, the ability to be in 2 places at the same time. When Bishop Raphael Razi asked him about bilocation as part of the Vatican inquiry, Pio replied, I don't know how it is or the nature of this phenomenon, and I certainly don't give it much thought. But it did happen to me to be in the presence of this or that person, to be in this or that place. I do not know whether my mind was transported there or what I saw was at some sort of representation of the place or the person. I do not know whether I was there with my body or without it. And there's a lot of like speculation around this. You know, is it that you've somehow allowed a demon to interpret you to like basically doppelganger you elsewhere? That's speculation. I don't know. Especially if the person doesn't remember doing it, there might be speculation that ever since really studying the law of one and looking at how these fourth density negative entities fool us a lot with spirituality, like with Moses, like all the dudes in the Bible were fooled by fourth density negative people, right? It makes me kind of wonder again. I mean, it's complicated, right? Because it comes again down to the integrity of the person too. And are they hurting people or helping people? You know, I don't know. All right, let's go on down to prophecy here, because this is something I did not cover, but I knew, but I didn't cover in the beginning. In 1947, he basically prophesied Pope John Paul II when he visited Pio. Pio told him he would one day ascend to the highest post in the church, though further confirmation is needed. Right, so we know that he did prophesize Pope John Paul II. Let's look at others. Razi describes in Pio a very intense and pleasant fragrance similar to the scent of a violet, and concludes that he was unable to determine the origin of the scent. Pio replied that he had intellectual vision seen through the eyes of the intellect, accounts of diabolical assaults and harassment against him, malicious visions under human shape and beastly shape. And Pio confirmed to Razi, a very few times I happened to feel inside me with clarity someone's fault, sin, or virtue of people whom I had some knowledge, or at least generally. So that kind of goes down through, generally speaking, these phenomenons that happened around Padre Pio, not, with the stigmata and without the stigmata. And it is interesting to listen to a lot of people's perceptions of him, people who had experience of him. So anyway, guys, that's it. That's a Mystery Monday for Padre Pio. Join us again this Wednesday on Aquarius Rising Africa Solutions with Shanti, the sister channel. We're going through all these stigmata cases. I like to drop my videos earlier so you guys can know what we're talking about, do your own research, and then join us for the live conversation. So what do you guys think? What do you think of Padre Pio? He was so requested. What do you think? Again, I think good man, had some mental disorders, had some scrupulosity, was probably a wonder. And I think that the church is now utilizing him, his essence, his heart, for their own personal gains. And I think that his life was chaotic because I think he was constantly being attacked. And I think sometimes he himself got confused between what was right and what was wrong. That's just my opinion. People are complex. So let me know, you guys, and I'll talk to you soon.